Hey everybody, welcome to Freemotion Fridays. I'm going to show you real quick. I just want to pick up my bobbin thread. It's just a little bit low, so I'm going to go ahead and put the presser foot down, and I will needle down and up. And I don't know if you could see that, but it did pull that up, so there's the bobbin thread right there. And this way I can have both of those threads accessible. Typically when I do free motion, I don't use the scissor button on my machine. That scissor button means that it's going to cut that bobbin thread pretty short, which makes it very difficult to pick up if you're doing successive quilting sections. So real quick, I want to show you some things about this little sample piece right here. This is Aurifil thread. A lot of times I use polyester thread. Mostly I use polyester thread. I love it. But we have all kinds of threads out there, and we shouldn't be afraid to try something different. So let me see if I can show you the beginning real quick. I want you to look really close. There are two different colored threads. The bobbin is a light blue and the top is a variegated. Now right there, and clearly right there at the point right there and right there, you can see that blue thread pulling up from the bottom. That is a sign that this top thread is pulling up really hard, so it's dragging this bobbin from the bottom up to the top of the quilt. And I kind of liken that to, if you have the water line, the bobbin needs to be below the water line and the top thread above. And that knot is right in the middle of this. So a couple of thoughts. If my batting is very, very thin, it's much harder to hide that knot. So people that want that excessively thin batting for that super, super flat look, that's great, and you should feel free to do that. There's no criticism of that. But note that it's going to be harder to hide high contrast threads, like if you had a black and a white thread together. It's a lot harder to hide those when your batting is really thin. Think about it this way. If I have this as my batting, look at how much more room there is for that knot to be hidden, right? So it's going to be easier to use two different colored threads on something like this than it would be on something like that. Although this is, this is normal. This is just regular thickness. I'll kind of go down to this end so you can see. Hi, Janet. Hi, everybody. You guys, I'm so happy to be back and to be home. So this is not super thin. This is Quilter's Dream. And so it's very dense, a nice quality batting, really great. But that'll be something important for you to know when you're working with free motion. Now, let's go back to the tension, the look, right? We're saying here it's not very good. And then on the yellow, you can start to see there's a little bit better. It's looking a little bit more like the stitch definition is showing right here, right? This is the start. I did this part first. And then as I came back down, I adjusted my tension. You can see it's bad right there. And not a clean little sharp point right there either. So what I did, it started at 6.2 as far as my tension number, and I was gradually reducing, and I'll get this up really close. This is starting to look much better, right? I don't see as much of that bobbin thread right there. And then now this is white, and so the color change is making a difference, right? It's going to show differently with different colors. And this one is all the way down to 3. And when I finally got down to where I felt like it looked good, I'm at 2.6 right now. And this is a cotton thread, and the bobbin is a 40 weight thread. So I'll just flip it over so you could see the bobbin thread as well. The bobbin thread tends to look good no matter what in this situation because it's pulling to the top. So you can't really see any of the top thread because the top thread is pulling so hard. So this is where it looks great on the back, but on the front, not as good. Okay, so do this test. Always take a scrap of your same batting and whatever fabric that you have left over from your project and make a quilt sample so that you can test that your thread is going to sew well, it's going to behave, and it's going to look good between the two colors. You definitely want to check that backing and your batting. So many times I've heard people say this to me before, oh, nobody's going to look at the back. And in my mind, when I hear that, I know that they're not a quilter Because every quilter I know, the first thing they do is they flip it over to look at the back and make sure the back looks as good as the front. And that's because quilters tend to be a little bit natural in their perfection quotient. They have a high need for looking good, right? So that's okay. And what I found is over time, as my quilting has improved, I've been more comfortable having a plain backing. All of my quilts from early on, they're all really busy fabric that doesn't show anything and it looks terrible, but nobody cares as long as the front looks good. Well, we want our back to look good too. So this tension is going to be really important. If I'm sewing and this is my back and I can see that yellow and the white and the lighter colored thread on this side, that means that my top thread is not working hard enough. And I need to increase the number or the dial for my top tension. I need the top thread to pull up more so that it will not show on the back. Okay, any questions on that so far? Everybody said hi, but I want to make sure that we know that, especially if we have some new people that are with us. So let's go ahead and we talked a little bit right now about the basics. Let's talk about the needle right now. The thread that I'm using is a 40 weight thread. So let me grab some needles. There's lots and lots of different needles out there, many, many good ones. So I'm not trying to endorse any particular brand. I actually have every brand out there, many different brands. I have purple tip needles, I have Schmetz, I have Inspira, lots of different kinds, many of them that work well. So I'm not trying to push any particular brand. However, Schmetz is a very common brand that is readily available. Quilting needles have a nice, sharp, long point, and they protect the thread. So what happens if this is the groove of the needle, right? There's a cutout, a little channel in the front of your needle, and your thread is riding in that groove, right? And what the groove is doing, it's protecting your thread from abrasion. So as the needle is penetrating so many times in and out for quilting, it can be rubbing against the fabric, it can be abrading, and that can cause shredding and poor stitch quality. And so the reason that we have that groove in the quilting needle is to shield that thread and protect it. And that helps prevent that abrasiveness from damaging your thread as you're sewing. So it's very important to have something like a quilting needle. And a top stitch needle is very, very similar. So to me, you could interchange either of these styles of needles. I use both of these for quilting. And in fact, I think the top stitch is even just a little bit longer. And so very often, this is probably my top choice. And then I have these also. So pretty much you can look at either of these. Schmetz does have a chrome needle, and that means that the needle resists heat from friction. So then you're not having another factor introduced into your sewing path, right? And then this will resist, deform from heat and things like that. So this needle will tend to last a bit longer. The other needle that you might see is actually a titanium coated needle. Titanium is a very, very strong metal, and so that needle will last perhaps 10 times longer than a regular quilting needle. How do I know when to change my needle? I think that you should change your needle after approximately 10 hours of quilting for a regular quilting or top stitch needle, and perhaps 20 for a chrome needle and up to 40 for a titanium needle. And I didn't just magically make up the 40 number. That came from educators from some of the top companies that are using titanium needles in their factory use, in their like Bernina company corporate use, and that allows them to use those needles for a lot longer. So there's a little bit of cost savings in there, but those needles are more expensive. So that's just something for you to know. I definitely don't recommend a jean needle. Okay, I've tried that for quilting, and I really don't think that it works well. You can test some other needles, like a microtex needle. Some fabrics would maybe work well with that. If your thread is just misbehaving, there's always the opportunity to try a different needle and see if it will perform better, because it's an interaction between the needle and the thread. If you have a metallic thread or a mylar ribbon thread, you definitely want that metallic needle, because the way the eye is shaped is designed to protect that thread even more. And you'll find maybe a little less problems when you use those specialty needles for those types of threads. Okay? All right, so we talked about our needle and we talked about our batting. And we've talked a little bit about thread in general, but let me just mention polyester thread. The reason I like it is two reasons. Super strong, right? If I try to break it, it's going to stretch some and then it will finally break. Cotton threads tend to break more easily. They're not as strong in general, and that is why you want to buy a thread. Let me grab one here. Got some cotton threads that say long staple cotton, right? So this is a cotton thread right here. And if I wrap it, right, see how it has very little stretch? It's not that you can't use this, right? But polyester is more forgiving for a new user. If you're free motioning, we're pushing and we're pulling and we're moving around, and that polyester thread is a little more forgiving for somebody that's not as comfortable with those movements and is not as experienced. So if you're having trouble with threads and you've been working with cotton, I recommend maybe try a polyester thread like Isacord or Glide or Magnifico, something like that. Also, polyester threads are a lot less linty. When you put this in your machine and you sew for 4 or 5 hours, you're hardly going to have any lint at all. This is very clean thread and it doesn't shed very much, whereas cotton tends to shred a bit more. And a cottonized polyester like Omni still has a good bit of shredding in it, but it's a little stronger. So something like an Omni thread, which is from Superior, it's matching up some of those features. It's matching up the polyester for strength, and it's giving you that cottonized look. Why is cotton desirable? What's good about it if it's not as strong? Because cotton is a natural fiber, it's going to wear as a natural fiber, and it's not going to be so strong that maybe it cuts through other fabrics that are weaker. It's going to last a little longer. It's not going to become brittle because it's cotton. And because it has that natural cotton texture, it's also going to yield and have a better drape, right? So like if I have this thread right here, look at how it just kind of relaxes. It's very natural in its drape. So let's compare that to the polyester. The polyester still has a nice drape. I'm not going to say it doesn't. I love it. But notice how it's just not as lanky. It doesn't just lay down like the cotton does. So there's always a choice that you have. And I think, when I started out, I remember taking a class from Holly Bullock, and she's telling me all of these amazing things. This is a very talented quilter way back, like almost 30 years ago when my son was probably, 2 years old. He's 28 now. So almost a quarter century ago. And she's giving me all this information about thread and needles, and it didn't mean anything because I didn't have enough experience to put it anywhere. So as I sewed more and more and more, and I could see the changes and I could see what that did in the bobbin, and I could see that this needle worked better than that needle, that's how I came to know that information in my own world and be able to put all of that stuff in different places. So one of the things that you can do is when you have a little scrap like this, play with it on that little scrap. Don't just throw this away. Just keep this little cut off from your quilt and use that as a little practice piece because you don't care about it and you can probably make something fine with it. Cut it up into little pieces and make little squares that you can put together later. All right, so we have our setup right now. We have our glider on. That means that I can move this very smoothly. So as I'm working, I can easily move my fabric without stuttering. That's going to help all of my lines be a lot smoother as I go. If the fabric is sticking to my surface or it has resistance, that makes it much more difficult to make those curves nice and smooth and pretty. So I absolutely love my glider. My feed dogs are in the down position. And I do love working with my ruler foot. You can use any Freemotion foot. This is basically the same as a floating foot. So I have different feet that I could use on this with a different anklet. And it's basically the same. The foot would hover a little bit and I would just be able to move. I prefer that to the darning foot because the darning foot compresses on the sandwich and lifts. And I just like this better. I feel like after doing so much ruler work, I can move more smoothly with the foot that's floating. Okay, so but lots of different things. You should try what works for you. Let's pull up our bobbin thread. Always when we're quilting, we want to do that. So we're going to do a little design right here that is very basic. Let me grab some chalk and we'll mark it off. And the reason I've chose this design is when we are talking about Freemotion basics, I'm just going to split this into basically 2 channels right here and we'll do 2 different variations of our design. Okay, how many people remember that paper that you had when you were in like 1st and 2nd grade and it looks like this? It has a line and then dot, 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 and then another line, something like this, right? Do you guys remember that from like a million years ago? I don't think our kids learned that, right? That was when they had you learning printing, and then when you were doing cursive, they would do that also. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with what we already have in our body. If you've ever done cursive, you know that it connects naturally. So I'm going to do A and a space, and this little loop is my space, and A like that. Okay? These are connected. Many of these movements are very, very natural and very common. You've got a curve and a change of direction, a connection, and then a connecting loop. Okay, so the reason I've chosen this is, you know, we don't necessarily all have A's in our name. I know that, but we're going to make this into something that's not a letter, but we're going to use the mechanics of something maybe that you have already practiced a million times, right? So that means that we're using movements that we already know. We don't have to teach those to our body. Okay, so let's do right here. We'll just pick up our thread. Okay, right now, the way that I've set up my batting, my foot, when I lower it down, I want you to see that it's very, very close to my fabric. I can move my fabric without any obstruction, but my foot is very low. If the foot is up above the fabric gets drawn up to the foot with the needle and then knocked off, drawn up, knocked off. We don't want that. So we're thinking about this acting like your embroidery hoop. It's holding the fabric a little bit taut as the needle is penetrating, and it prevents the fabric from being drawn up into the foot. So make sure that you're setting your foot at the proper height. And the way that my machine does that, it has presets for medium batting, which is a little thicker, and light batting, which is what I have right now. On a westerly foot, you would be unscrewing your foot right here, and you could raise or lower the foot to be set at the proper height for your fabric. And another way to adjust that is on many machines, you have presser foot, presser adjustment. So you can also use that for micro adjustments. So good question. Somebody just asked, my machine foot drops further once I go. How do I adjust it? So if your foot has what I call like the 2-stage sewing, it'll be at this level, and then when you tap your foot control, it'll drop down a little bit. So you're going to put your foot on and then lower it to the ready position and then tap your foot control and then tighten up your foot, because then that will be the sewing height. It has that ready position, and when you tap your foot control, it goes down to the stitch position. So that's true for machines like Baby Lock, Brother, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that do that, but I definitely have a machine that does that too. So that is just what you do. You would just put it on lightly with the screw, not tight, and put the presser foot in the down position with the button or whatever, and then tap your foot control, and that will make the foot go down to its sewing height, and then you could tighten up your screw, and that'll give you the proper positioning for your ruler foot. Okay, any other questions about that so far? I'm scrolling through on my phone, so it's just always hard to see the comments there when I'm on there. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll start. And if you're not comfortable just sewing that by yourself, I'm just going to go ahead and I'll just draw some in. So that's always something that you can do. Paper training or drawing on the quilt with the chalk helps us like get that spacing that we want to have. If we're trying to be very regular, having that helps us to put that right in the middle and travel to the next one. Because one of the things that we're trying to learn as we're working on our quilting is we're trying to learn this rhythm where we can keep things approximately the same size. So anything that you can do to train visually, that's something that you can just put a little bit. I guess I put my A really close there, so we'll just scoot out a little bit because we need to come up to him, right? We'll just move this over. It's okay, just pull that bobbin thread right back up. There we go. All right, so let's sew. All right, when I start out, if this is a new design, before I do anything, I'm just going to do a few tacking stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let the needle stop. Notice that I've moved just a little bit. I want to travel in that stitching space just a little bit. I don't want my stitches right on top of each other because they'll make a little stack of knots. So we have to move ever so slightly, but those stitches are like 0.2, 0.3, very, very tiny, and they're not going to come out. So let's go ahead and we'll travel up into our design. And here we're going to do A, and we're going to travel back down the existing stitch line. And we're looking ahead to connect right where we left off. And here we'll travel a little bit on the existing design. And we'll make that sweet curve in there and come back up to the top and change directions. And connect it and come down. So looking out in front of you, looking ahead at your design, traveling right in the existing line as you're closing that, and there's your loop, trying to make it nice and smooth. If I need to stop, that is an appropriate place to stop right there. Okay, this is where we have an obvious change of direction. We're not going to stop right there, right there, right there. That's going to make this pretty swoop right there a little bit awkward looking. So always thinking about if I need to reposition my hands, if I need to rest, where is the right spot? Now, I like to try not, if I have to track back over something, I want to track back first. So I may stop over here more realistically. Right here, I can remember this path right away. So now I'll have to be a little bit more careful and look very carefully as I'm coming out for this next one. Okay. All right, so we'll connect the dot and we'll go to the next loop. Okay, so you can see it's not perfectly perfect. I think this one is just a little bit bigger, but would I be okay with it? Sure I would. Let's go ahead and now we'll just change this into something else. I'm going to turn it so maybe you can see a little bit better. Let's see if we can come out so you can see a little bit more of it. All right, let me get my little camera adjusted a little better. Oh, it's being a little bit ornery, my little clip is. You guys know that some mornings it wants to work really well and some mornings it doesn't. So let's just change this, right? In this space, I can use this and I can echo right there. And that's just going to change my design. So I'm just going to curve up. I can use my foot as a spacer and come in. And I'm just going to stop there for now. I'm going to turn it so you can see. So it's changing, right? Now we have spacing. This is about that 1/2 inch. We could come in deeper if we wanted to, but this is just something really, really simple. And that's letting us use shapes that we already have and using the foot as the echo. And let's just add one more embellishment here. What we're going to do on this last part is we're just going to add a little more complexity. I'm going to come from this spot and we're going to put like a little cap on there, and then a little cap, and a little cap, and a little cap. So all of a sudden, instead of this being AAA, now we have something else. So push up to the top and come back down, and push up to the top and come back down, and push up to the top and come back down, and push up and come back down. So I'm going to cut this really quick. I want to show you what we learned by doing this. What is the task that we just taught ourselves by using that little design? Let me cut this real fast. Get my scissors out. Visually, I'm going to turn it this way, right here. Now we're practicing centering this onto here, centering this, so this one's a little bit off, centering this on the design, and centering this. So this is visual training. So we're also aiming. As we come back down, we're trying to aim here to get this a little centered, and aiming here to get this a little centered, and aiming here. So that's just some training that you can do with something that you know already. So something that you can do to practice this is maybe write your name and then quilt embellish your name, like with little flourishes, little brackets, little curves. That way you start off with something that is intimately familiar with you, that you've done probably 1 billion times in your life, and you've rehearsed that many, many times, and then you just create a little piece of artwork with that using what you already know. Okay, so this is kind of like basics. We did thread, needle, tension, batting, and some basics, right, of what you can do. And I know that we have people that maybe know a lot of that already. So what I thought I would do is just do a little bit of development that was based on the freezer paper concept that we did the other day. A lot of people liked that and found that very interesting. And I just want to show you some additional ideas. So we talked on that about making something that would fit your border, right? So let's say that my border is an odd size. This is actually 11 3/8, not 11 1/2 or 11 or whatever. So what I did is I just cut this to be the size that I wanted. And let's say my border is 63 1/3 or whatever, right? I can actually divide that into, say, quarters or fifths with just math. And I could make this border piece 5 units, right? So I could make it 1/5, and then I could move it down when I get down to the bottom of the quilt. I don't have to do 60 inches at a time, but I could make this piece match up to whatever repeat that I wanted to, right? And so if this was just 1/5, I can take this then, I cut it into 1/5, and I can fold it however I want. This is approximately a square. It's not actually square because that length doesn't lend itself to a square, but I can draw the design that I want, and I want to think about the path, right? So if I go on this one, I could go do my little loop-de-loop, and I can go here and get over to the next one, and I can probably even go all the way over and make my little loop and come back, bump, bump. Then you're going to travel on the same line and you would go over to there. Now, when I did this, I thought it looked really cool. And when I pounced it, I realized it doesn't connect very well. So let me show it to you and we'll talk about how you can make that connect if you want to. All right. So let's see. Oh, I think I flipped it over and I sewed it closed. Darn it. Here, there's a little piece of it. I flipped it over. This is that design, right? And so you can see they don't touch right there. So what I thought you could do if you wanted to make that is when you get down to the bottom, you can actually sew it as a square and hop over with a gentle arc and do the next one. And then you could make the arc match on this side with another pass in order to complete the design. Because that one didn't connect, I decided we were going to do one together to make sure it will connect. So this is the one that I did, and it pounced really easily and it looked great, but the designs did not connect nicely. So what I was suggesting is you could use a ruler and just hop over, and then you would do this whole pattern, and then hop over and do this whole pattern. And then to make this part match on the top, you would just arc, arc, arc. And this would be a border design. It would be designed for a 3-inch border, basically. So you could cut this to be whatever you want. Okay, so here's an example. We've taken it and we folded it. And I'm thinking about how am I going to connect this design to the next one. Right here is the start point, right? And I would want to go in and I would make this part. And I'm going to show you when we sew it out. I'm actually going to do this whole thing. You would start here and go this direction, come back up to here, put the middle in, and then connect here to go to the next one. So I literally have thought about the path, and the position of center is here, and you're going to end there. Okay? So when I'm doing this, I'm going to show you a couple of things. It's very difficult to work with a small piece like this and not have some fabric underneath it. If I just try to stick it under there like that, it's hard to control. You could even put a little piece of Elmer's glue or something like this just so it doesn't move around, or if you wanted to put like a pin in the middle. Let's see if we can do that. I think I have a pin that we can just tack that so it won't move around. And again, the idea behind this is training ourselves to be able to make a design that is possibly more complex than we could just make out of our own head. So many times people say, oh, just practice, practice, practice. And what I have found in my own world is if I can't make the design, like if I can't literally just draw it myself, I'm never going to make it perfect. So I got to train myself to get the shape and the movement that I want first. Okay, so I'm going to take my thread out of my machine because I don't want any thread. I just want no top thread. And I'm going to sew the path that I was just talking to you about. But I think I did one thing wrong. We're trying to make it match, right? So we're going to go like this. Right there. So obviously if it's very, very bulky, then it can be a little challenging and you may want to use an older needle, right? So right here, we're going to start the way that we want to go. And I'm trying to make this basically touch, right? Because we want these designs to kiss in the middle. All right, let's see if we can get this to hold in place. Like I said, this is the more advanced concept. Am I making it look hard? Oh, just get it to stay in there. I just want this not to interfere with the foot right there. That's what I was trying to do. All right, so we have no thread, and let's go ahead and sew. And I would use an older needle. You know, if I'm sewing this, I wouldn't want to use like a brand new needle. So here's where it's touching. So I'm just going to try to smooth that out a little bit because those are going to be touching. So I went a little more slowly. And I want holes. So it's okay if you sew fast. And here again, these pieces are connected, this one to the other one. So we want this one to kind of wing out as close to that barrier as it can. Nice and smooth. And then just come down to the bottom. Remember that when we're doing this, we don't have to do it in order because we can just raise our needle and we can just move to the other part. But this is how we would do it. The first side is going to be sewn like this, and the other side will be sewn to come up and meet it when we open this up. It's a mirror. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in our little flourish right here. So right here, it's going to be a little loop. And I'll probably do that center loop right there first, and then fill in. And this is going to bring us right back to the center up through this portion right here. And then we would just connect at the top. So I'll just do the little loop right there at the top. Back to the center, and that's where we advance to the next one. So let me show you. All right, let's open it up and see what we get, right? Okay, so we got, so right here, this is going to be a little bit not as smooth, but we'll smooth it out when we sew it. That was the best way to get that center loop. And see right there? So when we sew this, if there's a little overlap, our goal is to curl that right to the middle, right? So here is the pathway. I'm going to just sew it out for you with my scissors. Starting here, we're going to loop and go around down to the bottom and then loop up, and we'll finish this loop right here, and then we'll travel back and we'll do the center, and we can do this little loopy right there and then the little loopy right there. Then we're in the middle, and we're just going to travel up right here, and we'll do maybe a little circle right there to get us right up to the top. And then let me show you what that's going to look like. Okay, so then here's the path. Oh, there's the path, right? So then you'll have little kissing hearts right there. And if this area is too open, you can always add in anything you wanted to at any point. Like if we wanted to put like a little curl in there and come back and make this one go the opposite, we can do that. We can even just draw it right on there if we wanted to and then sew through it. But you know, I just wanted to keep it simple. So you get to evaluate right here. If this is too open in this midsection, just fold it back up and add some more, right? It's totally easy for you to do. So when we put it on, we need our iron, and let's see. Maybe we won't be able to iron it, but you could iron it on there, right? And we talked about saying that this was like 1/5 of the pattern, right? So I can mark off that border at 1/5, which should be the correct size of this paper, right? And then you put it on, and you're going to pounce this part. And then when you're done, you just pull it up, and you have a nice clean pouncy line. And then you're just going to move your pattern to the next part when you get to that next part. And that is how you would be able to make very customized borders for yourself and have them be the exact size that you want. So I have one more before we thread up and sew. This would be the border concept. And I just don't think that was clear when we did the last video. We did a little bit of development on freezer paper, but we didn't talk about path and development. And now that I see how this one is, you know what I would do right here? I would do this as a figure 8 right there and just come back. And then you could get right to that next one. So as you see the design, you can see what other elements maybe need to go in there. So maybe this even needs to come down further because that's a big gap right there. So this is a great way to evaluate the spatial relationship of your design and also to practice. And then this is my design. This isn't somebody else's design. It's whatever I draw or whatever I create. It's my personal design. And that way you're getting to put your own idea, your own design, your own development right on your quilt. Okay, let's do one last one really quick. I'll show you one that I did already. Let me see where it went. I think it fell down somewhere. Oh, there it is. Okay, I already got it ironed on. So that's something that we'll use in just a second. I'll show it to you real fast. Look, it looks awesome, right? Okay, so if I want to create a block, okay, and I want symmetry for the block, I need to think about where am I starting and where am I ending. So like, for example, if you had a block and I made it go from there to there, well, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be able to go where I want to go. For this orientation, I folded it into quarters, okay, and this would be my start point. And I would have to maybe think about if I was just going to finish the design there and then take this and move it to the next block, right? And I could actually maybe sew 2 of these. This is 4 units. I think 8 is very much the max limit in terms of freezer paper and needle, right? Anything more than that, you're starting to get really too thick and you're damaging potentially your needle and things like that. You're not going to get a good look. But this is a block, and this is a 6-inch unit. So let's just take our pencil or pen, something. I don't know where my pencil is. And let's just draw whatever, okay? And I'll just put this under it so we have a little extra tension right there to hold stuff. Because we said we're going to start in the center, let's find our fold right there. This would be our center position right there, okay? And I can do whatever I want as long as I can get back to the center, right? So I can do maybe little like grandiflora. So here, come in, and I can come back, and I can make this a curl. Okay, it doesn't have to be complicated. And you could echo this if you wanted to. You could put a vein in it, whatever you want. If you didn't like how you did it, you could, you know, make the lines a little cleaner right there. You can go back with your pencil and clean up the shape. If I wanted this one to be more like this, where it kind of was like a loop instead of a curl, I can make that change right there. Whatever you want. You make the adjustment to this design, right? And you clean it up and you make it however you want. So I'm going to make that one stretch out a little bit more and make this part a little shorter. So that's a little elongated. Okay, so let's sew it out. Just what I said before, I recommend just putting some scrappy fabric under it, okay? And then just put our needle down. And, you know, kind of want to see where you're going. That's important. And then just try to make it as smooth as you can. This is good practice for how you're going to sew it later. So here I want a nice smooth arc right back to where I wanted to go. Okay, and then a little flame to the top. And I can adjust that size. And here I'll make this little swirly. I didn't follow it exactly because I felt myself changing it as I went. Okay, and I want to be right at the center. So now we're done with it. So let's just see what we get, right? I don't know what we're going to get. Ooh, I like it already. Look. Doesn't it look cool? Okay. All right, let's open it up. So now, if I put it on there, this is our paper side up. Always make sure you got your paper side up. And I'm just going to pounce it so you can see. Where'd my pounce go? I think I put it away. All right, and again, the ironing part of this makes this super clean. If I can iron this on, and this will iron on probably about 10 times, you know, so you can use it repeatedly and you can make another one if you needed to. You know, if you're stopped sticking or whatever, you can just make another one. So I'm just holding it, and then let's see what we get. Ooh, so obviously need to do a little bit more there, but I love it. And I love that you get these secondary designs with the symmetry there, and these kind of curl in. And when I look at this right here, what I see is if I could make these curl in a little more, I could make a little heart out of this, which I think is very cool. So that would be just an idea. This would be something where you would start in the middle, and well, I'll just sew this out, and then we'll go ahead. Let me get myself locked in so I can thread this. And then we'll sew it out. And I'm going to put one more caveat on this, right? These designs tend to be somewhat regular, symmetrical. And I think you guys know that maybe that's not what I'm best at. I'm best at like little irregular designs. So it's okay. You can fudge it while you're sewing, you know, whatever you want to do. You're in charge. Nobody else is telling you what to do. So there's my thread right there. Let's get that right in the center. And think about your path. The way that I think I want to sew this is I think it's easier for me to go this way and flame. And remember, we talked about breaths when we did the stencil before. So right here, the breath is curl And this is one breath, and then one breath, one, maybe two. 1, 2, each one of those, because those are all changes of direction. Okay, so here we go. So don't sew really fast. You know, it's okay to just sew at a nice, even pace. Look out in front, follow the dots. We're trying to follow the dots as much as we can because we're looking for symmetry in the design. We're not trying to approximately follow them. We're trying to be on them. That's what's going to give us that nice symmetrical look right there. And that's also training for us to make sure that we can make the design what we want it to be, right? So far, so good. I think it looks good. So let's keep going. Change of direction. Don't stop until you get to the point, right? If I need to stop at the point, nice and smooth for the next one, and back to the center. Looking out in front of me, making sure that I'm going to smoothly get to the center. Right? Doesn't that look awesome? I love it. So far, so good. So let's keep going. All right. So again, if I want to use that same pattern that I just practiced a billion times, I want to follow the same direction. So following those dots. And also I'll mention that I would not use the same needle for punching that I would use for sewing like I'm doing right now, right? Because I don't think that's a good idea. Up, follow the dots. And if you can't see, you might just turn your work just a little bit so that you can follow those dots because you want to be able to see where you're going. Right now it's right behind me right here. So I think it's important if we're trying to follow something so specifically, go ahead and just see where you're going so that you can get your design back to the center. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll just do this next one, the last one. Oh, the third one. Nice and smooth. Try to follow my dots. And if you're a little bit off, that's fine. Nobody cares. I care, but I would like to follow them, but you know, it'll be okay. This design's pretty flexible. And that's something else for you to keep in mind. The more complicated you make your design, potentially the more difficult it is for you to follow it, right? So that'll be something for you to just consider as you're making your design. Make sure that you don't make it so super difficult so that you can follow it along. Back to the center right there, and then we'll do this last one. So I can't see it quite as well. If that ever happens to you, you know, you can just take this and just put a little bit of extra lead on there. Let's see, I think this one is the curl, right? No, that's here, here, and right there. So I'm just using my chalk pencil to just kind of get that curved in right there. There we go. So now I can see it just a little bit better. Following that same path that we talked about. You could go the other direction. I mean, there's nothing to prevent you, but if you're practicing it one way, it's going to probably look smoother if you continue to follow the path that you created already. So if it wasn't chalked well, next time when I take it off, I think I would want to check that before I take that off. Nice and smooth. Then my nice arc back to my other side. And then I can't really see where I'm going, so I'm just going to turn it just a little bit so I can get that nice shape in there. And that's the end of the design. And then I'll just go ahead and tack right through there. I love it. I think it looks awesome. All right, let's cut this and then we'll show you. And then that's it for today. I guess we probably went a little bit over time, huh? But that's okay. If you have to go, you have to go. And if you want to watch it later, you can watch it later. But at least you'll know what to do. So what do you think? Isn't that cool? I I love it. Now, obviously, I wouldn't do it on the same fabric, but you know, we're just trying to be economical. And let's flip it over. And this is the blue, right, on this fabric. I think it looks, it still does look like a heart, actually. I love it. Looks awesome, right? So this is, again, the option for you to maybe create a design that you maybe don't feel like you could do yourself right away. This is training, and it's a way to transmit your design. It's also a way to size a design perfectly. So if you basically had a stencil that was 6 inches, but you needed to be 7, you could sort of put that piece on there and enlarge it on your printer, and then you could make your own stencil so that you could transmit that design. And then, of course, you could free motion this. We could echo this. We could do whatever we wanted. But this is sized right now for that 6-inch block. And so just some different ways that you can get the designs that you want to have. So it's just one of those tools. I do have the Pounce sets available on my fabricated website, including the refills that you can use in your Choco liner. And this is freezer paper, not parchment paper. Make sure that you get freezer paper. It's available in most grocery stores. It's very inexpensive, and it's an 18-inch piece. It's pretty wide roll, and I think like 25 yards. So it's very inexpensive and lets you play. You can take pictures from the internet and you can transmit those into designs like this and get what you want out of it. So it's just very, very cool. Something for you to play with. So 1050, have an amazing quilting adventure. I think you guys saw, I'm going to say this out loud, I got accepted to Houston Quilt Show. I'm so excited. And so I hope if you're in that area, some of the classes are ruler only, like basic ruler use and the Janome set and the sampler set. I do have my pastiche ruler sampler, which is the Freemotion Friday kit and caboodle quilt that we did. So I'm going to be doing the ruler work portion of that at Houston and at Salt Lake. And I have all of those patterns now. The free parts of them are available on the website. So if you wanted to see like the spacing, things like that, those are available for free, and the supply list and things like that. So check those out if you're interested. And if you have friends that live in Houston, please help me fill my classes up. So have a great day, you guys. Happy quilting. I'll see you on Sunday. Bye-bye.